Once upon a time, there was a man who pondered on the idea of what would happen if one's time restarted every day, and the same day was repeated over and over again. Even though the time actually went forward, he keeps on staying stuck on the same day over and over again throughout the whole timeline. Initially, it seemed fascinating to him, as he could indulge in spending his money without any consequences, as he would have it all back the next day. However, as time went on, he grew bored with this monotonous routine and sought thrills by turning to a life of crime, feeling indifferent to his actions that have no proper consequence the next day of his life, as it doesn't even exist in the timeline. Time keeps on flowing and the situation continues to grow so bad for him that he keeps on gaining knowledge about everything around the world that exists in his time. Eventually, he became so disillusioned with his existence that he contemplated taking his own life, only to realize that he would still wake up on the same day as always. He had been living like this for 1,000 years when he met a girl whom he confided in about his predicament, as he lost all his hope. At first, she thought he was just trying to impress her, but he was dead serious despite her statements of disbelief. But only if she knew what was going on behind the whole story of him living the same day again and again like he was some guinea pig going through some vivid dreams. The man had honed thousands of skills in his countless lifetimes, but he had grown tired of it all and just wanted to talk to someone about his situation. The girl was understandably taken aback and believed him to be insane. She called her friend to come and rescue her from this odd man's company, but he knew her friend too well and recounted an event that only someone who had spent an extensive amount of time could have known. She continues to threaten the protagonist if her friend doesn't show up in the predicted timeline that he expressed to her. She gets flabbergasted to hear that her friend will not come to meet her, and she begins questioning him about it, as there is no way that he knows about her friend since they never met each other before. He claims that the reason behind her friend not coming to meet with her is because her ex has suddenly made a comeback in her life, which is so hard for her to ignore today. Not only that, but also, her friend will call her in an accurate motion of time, which takes her aback, as nobody would be able to predict something like that. Intrigued, the girl decided to stick around for a little while longer, but things took a sudden turn when a bully appeared and attempted to force her to drink with him. The man intervened and claimed that she was with him. Then the bully confronts the protagonist, throwing him the cigarette, but the protagonist does not even flinch. This causes astonishment to the bully. The bully doesn't back down, so he decides to lash out and throw a punch at him. However, the man effortlessly dodged the punch and delivered a knockout blow to the bully. This action drew the attention of the bully's boss, who threatened the man for hitting his subordinate. Even his threats don't work on the protagonist, as he doesn't back down from his unfathomable acts of braveness. But the man was unfazed and used his knowledge to call the boss of the gang, telling him to control his people. The boss was astonished by the man's confidence and expertise, but he had no choice but to comply. Also, the fact that he told her about her friend calling her phone ends up becoming the truth, as she gets called in by her friend before they are about to leave the entertainment club. After this incident, the man stole the car of someone quite powerful, claiming that everything would return to normal the next day, and convinced the girl to spend the night with him. Before she walks into the car, she claims that she will end up calling the whole police force on him if he ends up misbehaving with her, which he only replies with a sly evil smile to complete his own target. The moment he woke up the next day, he thinks that it will be the same day as always, as he frowns on his own while he continues to keep looking the ceiling and thinks that the beauty that he carried yesterday is now gone. To his surprise, the next morning was different from the previous days, and the girl demanded an explanation from him as his description didn't match up with the actual results. The man struggled to explain his predicament, leaving the girl in a state of confusion at the same time. While the protagonist takes a shower, he ponders the newfound freedom he has gained from his 1,000-year curse. While he is having the best shower of his life, the beauty in his room keeps on banging on the door to open her, as she is now demanding him to answer all her questions. Just as he begins to celebrate his liberation, he is interrupted by a mysterious system called the reincarnation system. The reincarnation system shows up by showing all the skills that he learned throughout these 1,000 years, and there is nothing in the world that he doesn't know. Starting from hacking to cooking food like a professional cook, he knows everything that everyone around him knows and better. This system informs him that he has passed a test that has lasted for 1,000 years. To his amazement, the system presents him with a menu that unveils his newly acquired abilities, including the power to control the time at will. The protagonist realizes that his mental prowess far surpasses his physical capabilities. Feeling elated with his newfound abilities, the protagonist bursts out laughing like a madman, frightening the girl who is accompanying him, as she keeps on thinking he might be someone who has some screws loose in his head. As he exits the bathroom, he shares the good news of his freedom with the girl. However, their conversation is abruptly halted when some men knock on his door, accusing him of stealing their boss's car. Also, their boss is none other than Wang, who is someone very famous in the underworld, and now they both are being hunted by him and all his men. Although the girl is upset, the protagonist explains that he did not expect time to return to normal on that particular day. He goes on to reveal that he had a difficult past as a prodigious student whose parents were severely beaten by some unfathomable forces in society. In response, he sought revenge, which eventually led him down the path of becoming a highly intelligent and dangerous criminal. He served a 3-year sentence for his actions, but he reveals that he must be careful as he had used someone even more dangerous the night before. He must proceed with caution to avoid becoming the most wanted man in China. To plan his next steps, the protagonist summons the system and orders a restart of the day, taking them back to the moment when the girl was asking for explanations. However, the protagonist interrupts her by playfully putting his finger in her mouth and asking her to get dressed. This leads to her biting him and calling him irresponsible. He then explains the situation to her, and the girl pleads for his help in dealing with her problem with the mobster, expecting him to be beaten to death. The protagonist assures her that his services will not be necessary as he knows a woman who can easily resolve the issue for them as she has quite a soft corner for him. He concludes by remarking that the girl is quite an interesting woman. The story begins with a car chase where the car owner's thugs are after the protagonist, who has stolen their car. The girl who is accompanying the protagonist is frightened by the thugs who are threatening them with guns. However, the protagonist seems to be enjoying the thrill and speeds up to evade the pursuers. The girl is surprised by his recklessness. To calm her down, the protagonist explains that he has no other choice but to evade the pursuers, or he'll get into trouble. Meanwhile, the car owner's thugs are determined to get their car back and eliminate the thief. In the midst of the chaos, the protagonist calls a woman named Mrs. Lai and informs her about a traitor working against her, potentially causing her to lose a bet. This information is unexpected, and Mrs. Lai is curious to know how he knows about it. The protagonist claims that he has his sources and can even provide information about her brother. However, due to the danger posed by the pursuers, he requests Mrs. Lai to send someone to pick him up. But as the pursuit continues, the protagonist uses his exceptional driving skills to perform dangerous maneuvers and drifts, allowing him to momentarily escape the pursuers. He then drops off the girl at her home, leaving her amazed and curious about how he knew where she lived. The protagonist explains that he has honed his driving skills through hundreds of near-death experiences, but he advises the girl not to try it as it could be dangerous. She asks for his number, but the protagonist speeds off, leaving her feeling used and suspecting that her friend set her up. The protagonist then reveals to her that Mrs. Lai's family business is a front for a cosmetics company, but her brother is one of the most influential men in the East China area as he has the ability to cause mass destruction. He also hints at having an intimate relationship with Mrs. Lai on one of his repeated days. Upon arriving at Mrs. Lai's office, she dismisses her guard and reveals personal information to him, which the protagonist praises. It seems that she had revealed his name Wu Chen and all of the information regarding his personal and educational life, as it doesn't just stop there. She also knows about his sister's name, who is Wu Jiao, and the fact that she is currently studying in high school. The whole demeanor of Mrs. Lai is quite impressive in that she has found out all this information just by having his phone number. However, Lai confronts the protagonist, knowing that he has information about the traitor. The protagonist introduces himself as a knowledge trader and demands 10 million in exchange for the information. Lai questions him and points a gun at him, but the protagonist reveals that the gun has no bullets, leaving Lai with no means of attacking him. Lai was taken aback by the protagonist's swift and skilled actions. She was unsure when he had managed to retrieve the gun from under her desk. The protagonist used Lai's confusion as an opportunity to explain that his abilities as an informant were based on his extensive knowledge. He had already known about the gun's location, giving him an advantage over her. After reloading the gun, the protagonist returned it to Lai, reassuring her that his motives were solely driven by money. Lai was intrigued and asked the protagonist what else he knew about her. In response, the protagonist began to play with the gun while divulging details about Lai's life. The protagonist revealed that despite being the oldest, Lai's father treated her differently because she was a girl. Lai was determined to prove that women were just as capable as men, if not stronger. Her mother was pressuring her to marry a man named Ding Ruolong, whom she did not love. However, her concern for her mother's well-being held her back. To avoid marrying Ding Ruolong, Lai opted to have fake boyfriends. Unfortunately, the men she started relationships with ended up injured or in prison because of her fiancé's unfathomable actions, causing her to have no suitors. The story then shifted to the business world. Mrs. Lai and her fiancé made a bet to see who could create the biggest business in 5 years. The protagonist exposed the traitor who had sold out to Lai's fiancé, thereby securing the victory for him. Lai was convinced by the protagonist's efforts and signed a check for the requested amount. Lai then asked the protagonist to reveal who the traitor was. At this point, Lai's main assistant, Feng Yun, entered the room. The protagonist took immediate action and slammed him against the desk. forcing him to confess. When Feng Yan refused to confess, the protagonist was left with no choice but to call Lai's fiancé and confirm their alliance. Lai was understandably angry and confronted the protagonist for betraying her trust for just 5 million. The protagonist, however, shifted the blame to Lai's mother, claiming that she had forced him to make her lose and marry the man they wanted her to be engaged to. Although he indirectly denied this, he revealed that it was Lai's grandfather who wanted her to marry Ding Ruolong. Surprisingly, Lai decided to let Feng Yan go, which confused the protagonist, who had thought that he would be killed. Lai then explained to the protagonist, informing him that her trader would be swimming with the fishes at night. After being sunk in cement at the bottom of the river, Lai admitted that she now distrusted the protagonist and believed that the entire situation had been orchestrated by her fiancé, who wanted to become the informant. The protagonist approached Lai once again, urging her to trust him and suggesting that they start a fake romance to gain her trust once again. The protagonist claims that this is the best way to prove his innocence. Lai then tells him that she has had boyfriends before, and her fiancé, Ding Ruolong, hurt them all. However, the protagonist replies that it will be interesting to have a relationship with her. Lai points the gun at him and, while highlighting his qualities, she asks him if he is not afraid of dying. The protagonist tells her that he is not afraid at all because if she wanted to kill him, she would have done it already. Lai then tells him that she likes him a lot, and to formalize their fake relationship, they take a picture. After taking the picture, he tells her that they are already a couple and that he will ask someone to register it later. She then asks him what's going on with her brother and his business. The protagonist proceeds to comment that his brother has tightened relationships with famous and high-level people, and they have already been investigating him. They may shut down the network in a month, and he will be taken to prison. But that also means that Lai's family will have to banish him from the family. Lai worries about her brother, and the protagonist claims that it is true. In the evening at Lai's brother's entertainment club, the guy who chased the protagonist in the morning is telling him what happened. Then, we meet the car owner, Wang Zhuangyuan, who asks captiously if the protagonist wants to die. But a guy named Zhao Guizi wonders how the protagonist got his number and knew about a private matter of theirs. Lai's brother, Lai Ruitai, says that no matter the cause, he just asks to bring him in so that he can crush him to death. Lai arrives and scares her brother, and everyone present. They put out their cigars, and Lai's brother asks if something bad has happened. Lai tells him she just wants to introduce him to someone. The protagonist gives the car keys back to Lai's brother and says he just took them for fun. Then the guy who chased the protagonist tells Lai's brother, "That's the guy who impersonated me." The protagonist thinks a bit about the Lai siblings' childhood and why brother Lai respects and fears his sister. Why so much? Brother Lai was about to make fun of the protagonist, but sister Lai exclaims to him that now the protagonist is her brother-in-law, which scares everyone present. Brother Lai, annoyed, asks his sister what she saw in him. Then, sister Lai starts to whine at the protagonist's chest, blaming him just to keep the act together. The protagonist tells Lai that his brother almost fainted on the spot for real. Lai Ruitai suspects that his sister is pregnant by the protagonist. He considers it a genuine relationship and wonders how it happened or what the protagonist did to cheat on her. Lai has no experience in relationships, and his sister only prefers older men. Lai's brother asks the protagonist how he met his sister, and the protagonist mentions in an intern recruitment occasion she did 3 months into college. This impresses Mrs. Lai herself, but Lai's brother questions him. After only 3 months of knowing each other, they have already started a relationship. Brother Lai reproaches the protagonist that he was seen with another girl in a bar the night before. The protagonist tells him that the girl is Mu Kayan, the daughter of the head of a biomedical group named the East China Sea Mu Biomedical Group. He also tells one of the thugs that if it wasn't for him, his men would have hurt that man's daughter, which would have unleashed a war against that man, costing him some casualties. Brother Lai reluctantly agrees that he must thank his brother-in-law. This shocks sister Lai, who says that they should talk about the matter and informs her brother that someone higher up wants him out. This scares off the mobsters, and brother Lai claims that he has everything under control, so he is not aware of that matter. The protagonist then tells him that this happens for blackmailing people, plus his business with a dangerous guy named Zai Hu. Sister Lai scolds her brother for not listening to her and having done business with that guy. The protagonist confirms this and alleges that the guy he did business with sold him out. The distraught Lai brother mentions that his sister had no knowledge of that matter, so she asks how he knows about it, to which the protagonist mentions that he is only there for sister Lai and is not obligated to say anything. Brother Lai bursts out in anger at the protagonist and demands that he speaks plainly, or he will kill him. The protagonist calmly says that many from the judiciary know about this matter, especially the deputy police commander named Liao Bo, who introduced agents undercover. The protagonist proceeds to give a list of these agents. Brother Lai orders his right and left-hand men to check all this information and threatens the protagonist to kill him if it is false. But after confirming what the protagonist said, He orders to kill all those involved. The protagonist tells him to calm down as that would make the higher-ups start their attack. Brother Lai asks the protagonist if he has any plans, and the protagonist tells him that all he has to do is apologize to him, and he will fix it for him starting piece by piece. The only matter the protagonist is concerned about is how much money Brother Lai is willing to spend to save his future. At this, Sister Lai tells him that they are family and requests the protagonist to help her brother out. But the protagonist tells her that Brother Lai doesn't treat him like a family member. So, Brother Lai starts acting and treating the protagonist like his brother-in-law. He apologizes and asks him to tell him what he needs him to do. So, the protagonist says, for Sister Lai's sake, he will tell him what he needs him to do. He tells him that he will have to kill the dangerous guy named Zai Hu, whom he had done business with. Since the guy goes to a villa to get high, he can pass it off as an overdose while he gets busy using drugs with his mistress. The second thing he needs him to do is to retrieve the evidence the deputy police commander has about him and his business. Brother Lai agrees to do as the protagonist told him, but the protagonist reminds him that it will not be easy because the evidence is kept in a safe in a very protected place. So, he will use a certain password containing 571,564 to destroy the evidence. This surprises Brother Lai, who is amazed that the protagonist knows so much information exactly. So, the protagonist tells him that he should tell the old man of the Y family what happened to the dangerous guy he had done business with because that family wanted to catch him. Then the protagonist says that the Lai family and the Y have had an endless war. The Lai want to ally with the Ding to get rid of the Y. So the protagonist advises him not to let the Y attack now that he is solving his problems. Brother Lai agrees to tell the old man. Then the protagonist concludes by saying that he will have to set a little fire to the club he runs, which shocks Brother Lai. The protagonist tells him that it will be a good excuse for the suspicions towards him to dissipate. Then Sister Lai asks his brother if he understood everything while scolding him. Brother Lai fearfully claims that he will do everything his brother-in-law told him. At that time, Brother Lai gets the news that one of his men lost 2 billion. Brother Lai asks the protagonist to excuse him that he must go to settle some business in the casino. So, the protagonist elaborates that it is Shen Guangjin who is the owner of Fasheng Aluminium. Brother Lai is astonished to see how the protagonist knows about the incident. Then the protagonist and the Lai siblings go to Brother Lai's casino, where the protagonist informs him that this man invited a certain gambling expert from the city of Macau in the Special Administrative Region, intending to snow the previous incident. It is in this way that the protagonist tells Brother Lai that the problem of his club is not to be ostentatious, or that he photographs celebrities to blackmail them, but it is his business with the guy who is dangerous and to make many wealthy people come to that place, to make them lose money. One of the cases is that of a certain Shen who lost millions, and as revenge, he told it to the Y family. The Y started to investigate the Lai brothers' casino, and they found valuable information with which they could destroy the Lai. This causes Brother Lai to get angry and want to kill him, but the protagonist tells him to calm down and let him talk to him. So Shen tells him that he hopes he doesn't mind that he's winning, to which Brother Lai says they can still afford it. Shen informs him that he still has many more masters he can still play with, so the protagonist volunteers to serve the game to the next gambling master that Shen wants to bring. In this scene, Shen boasts about his success in winning money and confidently declares that he will win even more. This causes Brother Lai to become anxious and he seeks the opinion of his sister about the protagonist's gambling abilities. Sister Lai admits that she doesn't know whether or not the protagonist knows how to gamble. Sister Lai then approaches the protagonist and inquires about his gambling expertise. The protagonist responds with unwavering confidence, stating that he is capable of winning in any casino in the world. The betting begins, and the protagonist bets 500,000 with confidence. As the protagonist continues to win repeatedly, Brother Lai starts mocking the master gamblers he brought along. Shen becomes convinced that the protagonist has fallen into the trap set by his gamblers. Despite this, the protagonist continues to win as the rounds progress, and he decides to increase his bets to 1 million. However, the master gambler tries to provoke the protagonist by increasing the bet to a staggering 100 million. The confident master gambler believes that he has won, but it turns out that the protagonist had a card that guaranteed his victory. The master gambler becomes angry and upset because he was cheated. The games continue, and the protagonist wins every round of the 31 rounds played. But in one round, the rival gambler acknowledges that they both have a very even hand and encourages the protagonist to place a bet of 200 million. The protagonist agrees and places the bet. Sister Lai expresses concern about the high stakes of the gambling game, but her brother disagrees and sees it as an opportunity to capitalize on the protagonist's apparent good luck. The master gambler intervenes by pointing out that the protagonist's impatience was his downfall, and he draws a winning card. which leads viewers to believe that he will change Shen's fate for the final time. Shen taunts brother Lai when it seems like he has lost the bet, but the protagonist reveals that he has not lost and invites brother Lai to verify the result. The master gambler reveals the protagonist's winning card, which surprises everyone, including Shen, who had mocked brother Lai. When the master gambler questions whether the protagonist saw his cards, the protagonist admits to having discreetly glanced at them without the master gambler's notice. The situation gets rough for Shen as all the money that he brought into the casino today was funded by the borrowers, which is now up to him to decide how he will keep on managing all the funding. The protagonist then boasts about his gaming skills and claims to have planned the game from the beginning, setting the master gambler up as his prey. Brother Lai continues to taunt Shen, but the protagonist intervenes, asking brother Lai for a knife. He takes the master gambler's arm and shows everyone that he had held onto a card that he had not revealed because he kept losing. The master gambler tries to claim it was a misunderstanding, but the protagonist slams his hand on the table and threatens him with the punishment of losing his hand. Shen is terrified by the protagonist's behavior and denies having instructed the master gambler to cheat. The protagonist returns the knife to brother Lai and instructs him to handle the situation. Sister Lai approaches the protagonist and asks him if he feels any remorse or regret for his actions. The protagonist responds that he does not feel anything, as he sees it as the master gambler's fault for cheating. Sister Lai is astonished by the protagonist's calmness and suspects that he may have killed someone before. Otherwise, the kind of composure he had throughout the whole incident must have made him sick. Sister Lai and the protagonist are traveling together in a car when Sister Lai expresses surprise that he is good at gambling, given that he is an intelligence trader. However, the protagonist quickly changes the subject and reminds her to give him what they agreed on earlier. Sister Lai realizes that he is only interested in money. Suddenly, the protagonist notices that a car is following them, and Sister Lai's chauffeur confirms his suspicion. Sister Lai orders the driver to lose the spies of the man who wants to marry her, but the protagonist thinks they might not be after her, which seems kind of confusing to her. To ease Sister Lai's fear, the protagonist holds her hand and assures her that everything will be okay. Sister Lai is pleased with how he handled the situation and offers to take him out to lunch as a reward. The two arrive at a fancy restaurant, and the protagonist asks Sister Lai if she minds being seen with him. Sister Lai, however, insists that she wants everyone to know they are together. During their meal, an old man named Han Deli, who is the chairman of the Longcheng Innovation Group, arrives and greets Sister Lai. She introduces the protagonist to him, and Han Deli compliments the protagonist with flattering words. Han Deli apologizes for interrupting their date and leaves them because his client arrived. Sister Lai then describes Han Deli's position and personality, but the protagonist interrupts her and claims to know more about him than she does. As they converse, Sister Lai mentions that many people do not want to befriend her. At that moment, Liu Kexu, who is Sister Lai's top enemy competitor, arrives. She had set up Yungxiu Fashion Co. with the help of Lu Guanian. Kexu begins to taunt Sister Lai, saying that she wants to date younger men because she is older. Sister Lai is upset and prepares to throw her coffee, but the protagonist stops her. The protagonist stands up and addresses Kexu, saying that she looks familiar. Kexu becomes nervous, and the protagonist asks her if he had seen her in a brothel quite immediately. This catches Kexu off guard, and the tension dissipates. Kexu protests angrily, claiming that this is slander. So, the protagonist confronts her by telling her that he knows she had plastic surgery, but that won't erase her past. When he says that, Kexu is astonished because that is more than a decade old. Even Lai herself is surprised at the level of intelligence of the protagonist. At that moment, a guy named Guang approaches and asks Kexu why she is arguing. Kexu dramatizes and tells him that the protagonist called her a slut and asks him to punish him for her sake. So, the man asks Sister Lai for an explanation and asks for the identity of the protagonist. Lai introduces him as her boyfriend. Guang then threatens the protagonist, saying that what he did was just like insulting him, and he won't solve it with words alone. However, the calm protagonist claims that there is someone who will take care of it for him. Guang replies that Sister Lai won't be able to save him. But at that moment, the protagonist mentions Ma Huafeng, a name that scares Guang, as he doesn't think the protagonist knows that person. However, Lai doesn't understand what Guang's reaction is about as she doesn't know the backstory. Then the protagonist takes Guang to a private place and starts telling him the story of a woman named Liu Liwan. Li was enticed by her lover to work in a brothel, but at that time, she met a rich man. Sometime later, this man was unable to have children because of a fight with another guy, and one day he told Liu about it. Liu schemed to have plastic surgery so that with the help of her lover, she could marry the rich client. Years later, a baby would be born to Liu, which obviously belonged to Liu's lover, but they paid a doctor who performed the DNA test to falsify it. So, the protagonist reveals to Guang that he should have noticed it before. The protagonist then concludes that their plan is to cause him to die in an accident so that Liu and his lover can keep the fortune. Although Guang doesn't believe the protagonist tells him that he can prove that Liu and his lover are still in a relationship since they were at a bar the day before. Guang confronts Liu and asks her if she was with her cousin the day before, and she unsuspectingly confesses to him. Then Guang finds out, and as she tries to dramatize, Guang slaps her and tells her to get lost because he already knows everything. After this, Guang, hurt, apologizes for the theater he put on and because he will not be able to have offspring. Then the protagonist interrupts him and tells him that it is not so he will tell him a second story that he needs to hear out. The protagonist recounts the story of a couple who were once happy and living together. Unfortunately, their love didn't last as the man betrayed her by choosing money and a mistress over their love. Things only got worse as the woman became pregnant, and her parents disowned her for her situation. Despite the challenges, the woman bravely raised her child alone, who grew up to become a successful adult with a family of his own. During their conversation, the protagonist reveals to Guang that he not only has a son but also a grandson. Guang's wife never married, fearing getting hurt. As a gesture of goodwill, the protagonist gives Guang a card with the address of his first love so that he can reconnect with her. Guang is overjoyed and grateful, thanking the protagonist for his kindness. As they part ways, the protagonist is dropped off near his apartment. Lai, who is aware that her fiancé's men are following her, pulls the protagonist close and kisses him passionately. In response, the protagonist teases her, revealing that he can tell it was her first kiss. At the protagonist's apartment, the girl he had slept with and her friend Lily was waiting for him. The girl's friend is angry and expects to beat him up for what he did to her, but the girl defends him, saying that she had done it voluntarily. However, her friend still accuses her of being brainwashed by him. When the protagonist arrives, the girl's friend confronts him for what he did to Kyan. The protagonist playfully mocks her for being scared of him. He then reveals to Kyan's friend that her boyfriend is cheating on her and suggests she do the same so that he can confess his infidelity to her himself. Kyan's friend Lily decides to investigate the truth and calls her boyfriend, only to confirm that he is indeed cheating on her. Shocked and upset, she leaves the building, leaving Kyan alone and bewildered in front of the protagonist's door. As she continues to process what she's learned, the protagonist takes advantage of the moment and pulls Kyan into his apartment. Despite her protests and objections, the protagonist wakes up exhausted and asks Kyan if she's going to get up. Kyan responds by telling him to let her sleep because of all the actions from the previous night. The protagonist gives her his number so that they can meet up and dance together again later. Later on, the protagonist realizes that someone is following him. He talks to someone on the phone and arranges to meet them at the training camp. The protagonist then begins to train because he knows that he has messed with someone dangerous and must be prepared. The Lai brothers' bully, Wang, approaches the protagonist after his training. Wang tells the protagonist that he sent people to protect him. The protagonist warns Wang that as soon as brother Lai finds out what he's doing, he will kill him. However, Lai doesn't do anything. Wang is scared and asks the protagonist what he wants. The protagonist proposes that they become comrades so that he can later use Wang's men if necessary. Wang agrees, and the protagonist knows that he now has hands to rely on in case Lai's fiancé attacks him. At that moment, Sister Lai calls the protagonist and asks him to come back to the office urgently. Wang apologizes by giving him his car and clothes. The protagonist arrives at the office and finds a lot of work waiting for him. He asks Sister Lai what's going on, and she informs him that her singer and product announcer had an accident. The protagonist senses that this is not a coincidence, and Lai agrees, becoming upset as she believes that someone is pushing the limits. The protagonist proposes to find a replacement, but Lai says that they have a very high standard. The protagonist suggests a famous actress named Tao Menying who is a national first-class movie star with some precious awards including the Gold Horse Award. But Lai believes that she's too famous for them to get. However, the protagonist is confident and proposes a bet. He tells Lai that he will have the actress ready to sign the contract the next day. Lai looks incredulous as the actress is very famous and has a busy schedule. The protagonist knows that this is a big task but he's willing to take the risk. Besides, Tao Menying is currently staying overseas. Then, the protagonist insists on making a bet, so Lai accepts as long as the protagonist shuts up. The protagonist bets her that he will have his actress the next day, and if he can't, he will pay her back the 10 million and also give her 10 million more. But if he brings the actress, she will have to give him 20 million. As he wins the bet, she should not be jealous of him. So, Lai says that they are in a fake relationship, and she should not feel jealous feelings towards him. He can be with whomever he wants, and she has no right to interfere. Then, the protagonist leaves happily. The protagonist calls Wang to help him and asks the best players in Wang's group to start playing. Once they start, the protagonist gives some directions to the subjects, and they should be added to a prefix name, and then they should wait for him in the square. The protagonist invests $10 million in the game. 4 hours later, Wang's men and the protagonist are playing an MMORPG and winning many games. Then, Wang tells the protagonist that they are now the biggest group on the server, but he reproaches him for spending $8 million on that. The protagonist tells him that there are no casual players in that game, and since there is only the second biggest group left, he proceeds to make his next move. The protagonist agrees to an attack against that group, starting a pitched battle between both groups. Then, the leader of the clan, the protagonist, attacked, praises the protagonist for being such a fan of the game since he spent too much money, but he claims that both guilds have similar strengths, so there doesn't seem to be a winner. The protagonist replies that the winner will be decided soon. Faced with that confidence, the rival guild leader asks the protagonist how he will win, but the protagonist tells him that the one who will win will be him. This perplexes the guy. Then, the protagonist orders Wang's men to disarm and leave the game. The rival guild leader begs him not to leave, that he had not got a worthy rival. Then, the protagonist tells him that it is inevitable since his wife's company lost the girl who gave voice to the promotion of his products and had an accident, so now he must help her. The confident guy tells the protagonist that he can get him several actresses to help them as soon as possible if he keeps his word that he promised. So, the protagonist smiles because he achieved his goal. The protagonist indirectly reveals to him where he is from. And after that, the protagonist disconnects. Immediately after, he gets a message from the leader of the guild they just confronted. As it turns out, he asked the server owner who invested so much. The protagonist agrees to meet with him to agree on what he had been promised and then tells Wang's men that they can leave if they have nothing else to do. The guild leader agrees to meet at a special building. Upon arrival at the agreed building, the protagonist asks for a guy named Lei. However, the man looks suspiciously at the protagonist and asks him if he was the guy he played with. The protagonist introduces himself, and after the guy asks him if he knows him, the protagonist tells him his whole biography. The guy then asks him if he comes from any family he knows about, to which the protagonist approaches him cautiously and asks him if he plans to kill him. The protagonist tells Lei that his family owns one of the top companies in the industry, and many in that family consider those who approach him as traitors. Despite this, Lei keeps insisting on asking what family he comes from, and the protagonist tells him that he doesn't come from any top family. Lei thinks he will get the information out of him and asks him how come. With so much money, he can't hire a spokesman. The protagonist tells him that someone has been attacking them, so not many consider making deals with them. Lei reproaches the protagonist for deciding to spend millions on a game to kill players and blow off steam, to which the protagonist reveals to him that his girlfriend is from the Lai family. Lei smiles and tells him that he should have started there. Lai calls the protagonist and yells at him for spending 10 million on games. The protagonist comments that he can't explain it at that moment, so he reminds him of the bet, which surprises Lai. The protagonist starts telling Lei what is happening to his girlfriend's company, and how a guy named Ding Ruling has been attacking them. Lei recognizes the guy's name, and the protagonist tells him that Lai wants to protect him. However, the protagonist can't accept that as his pride as a man prevents him. Lei understands and agrees to help him. The protagonist tells Lei about the bet he made with Lai. Disguised with lies, Lei agrees to help him, and the protagonist thinks that Lei will never treat him unfairly for challenging Ding. Lei gives the protagonist permission to call him brother and asks him if it was fate that they met. The protagonist shows a number on his cell phone to Lei and tells him that he must find the owner of that number. The owner will tell him about his accident 10 years ago. At this, Lei changes his face to a completely angry one, even though the protagonist is ready to tell who the culprit was that ruined the life of brother Lei. He has to be quick to reach his biggest enemy as there are chances that he will reach overseas, as his name is none other than Qing Shengjun. Brother Lei thinks to himself what he should do other than informing his people to get on ready with their actions to hurry up the process, as they cannot let him slip away from his grasp. He remembers the dark night which came into his life crashing as a premeditated truck crashed into their car at a road junction. Even though Brother Lei did his best to retract quickly, none of it helped him at all as their car flew straight off the cliff and the car soon exploded into overwhelming flames in just a minute. As it wasn't devastating enough, Brother Lei somehow saved his life, but he lost his beloved wife in the accident, who died right in front of him. For that collision, Lei had to suffer a timeline of 3 months during which his agent brought him some clues about the perpetrator. Also, the driver was Qing Shengjun, who is the deputy head of the security department of Hongfa Group and worked directly for his brother Lei Yu. As the perpetrator vanished, it made Brother Lei lose the direct evidence that he had against them. So he had to accept his father's words and tried to forget the past, even though it was never possible to accept something like that. All these 10 years, Brother Lei continued to act like a dumbass and cynical rich bastard, waiting for the culprit Qing Shengjun to arrive so he could discover the truth behind his destruction. While the protagonist and Brother Lei were communicating with each other, one of his men entered the room to say that the identity of the culprit along with the address has been verified. Brother Lei realizes that he has to go as soon as possible, so he states his departure to the protagonist. Brother Lei also says that he will be owed to him, and he can ask him anything he needs from now on, as he is his brother from now on. The whole scenario makes the protagonist relax, as he has already got 2 sworn brothers in 2 days who would do anything for them, as they are Lu Guanyin yesterday and Lei Cheng today. But he remembers that he will have to focus on something rather more important, which is that he has to get his 20 million first, along with a kneeling apology from Mrs. Lai. The moment he rings up her phone, the automated voice states that his call is on hold, so he should be trying to call her later. After some time, Mrs. Lai states that she is in a meeting, but he soon realizes that she must be still mad at him for the same reason, for taking out $20 million to play a game. He decides to hang up the call, claiming that that is what women do, as they tend to lose the importance of a certain target. The protagonist makes his way onto the road with the flashy car he has now in his grasp. Suddenly he notices other flashy luxury cars around him, and in one of them there was Su Qingying, who is the most beautiful woman in East China Sea. Surprisingly, she is one of the women whom he spent quite some private time with, as she was able to impress him the most in the previous reincarnation life. It might sound unrealistic, but she is the most different from the inside and outside, as she is the most obedient and docile when it came to behavior and attitude. The protagonist decides to jump into the topic of flirting after getting a chance to meet, all of a sudden feeling that it will be a good idea to do so. But instead of responding to his flirt or being supportive of it, Ying decides to close the car window in his face, which makes him act like a flirt once again, as he ends up texting her about it. The protagonist knows that she will be surprised after getting the text, knowing that almost nobody gets to know about her number, as she keeps it rather secret from everyone. He knows that it will make her take the initiative to ask him out and negotiate, so he decides to wait it out for a while. He is driving his car. Soon he gets a reply out of nowhere, which makes him feel like it was too soon. But it seems that the person who texted him is none other than his so-called girlfriend's brother, Lai Ruitai, who is calling him to give him something in pure happiness. He ends up visiting Brother Lai, thinking that it might be something important, and it seems that Brother Lai wanted to give him a huge house that has 3 floors above ground and 1 below, in total of 600 square feet, and a courtyard. He couldn't believe that he would do something like that for him, which felt like a dream come true. He states that the protagonist has been a great help since yesterday, as he recovered all of his money and also made a lot at the same time. He was concerned about her sister, as well as he didn't want her to keep on living in the same old house since she is pregnant, according to her. So, Brother Lai wanted it to be an early wedding present, and he asked for the protagonist's ID so they can make the deal closing right now as soon as possible, which caught our man right there kind of off guard. On the other hand, Tao ends up visiting the Lai company office asking for Mr. Lai, claiming that she has an appointment with him, but the receptionist fails to find out any details about it. At the same time, the whole meeting room members were barely able to keep on holding on to their chairs, knowing that they haven't found anyone fitting for the product promotion, as the conference is only in 13 days from now on. Lai Ruobing didn't know about the arrival of Tao, as she didn't take the call of the protagonist, so she kept on barking in the meeting room in front of her employees. Suddenly, she gets a call from reception saying that Tao Manying has already arrived at their office, looking forward to meeting her, and she realizes that it must be the protagonist doing, as none of the employees has invited her. When she ends up meeting Tao, she claims that her godfather Mr. Lei Cheng and the protagonist are like brothers, and this is the only reason why she has come to sign the contract. Mrs. Lei couldn't help but wonder how something like that happened, as he never told her about knowing Lei Cheng, the son of Lei Zhenghui of the Hongfu Lei family. As Tao has to hurry up, both of them rush through the contract signing of the spokesperson signing, which ends up creating great cooperation in the end. Soon after, the protagonist ends up making his usual entrance into the Lei property to meet with Mrs. Lai once again. But this time he is looking for the apology from the beginning, as he has kept his promise as he said he would do. She ends up asking him about how he knows Lei Cheng, but the protagonist decides not to reveal his cards in front of her and presses on the matter of an apology. Mrs. Lai ends up standing from her seat to keep the promise that she made to her, so he announces her name and kneels down on the ground, which seems unbelievable to the protagonist. Soon, Lai gets called by her brother saying that someone is investigating the protagonist, as he just got the news. Also, the news isn't something normal, as the one that is investigating him is none other than the Golden Service Group, the Su family. The moment Mrs. Lai hears that the Su family is behind him investigating secretly, she gets concerned and keeps on asking him about it, but he refuses to answer them at any cost, since there will be a risk of her getting entangled in the matter. Mrs. Lai thinks that he might be pretending to be mysterious once again, as he is acting uncanny all of a sudden to make her fall in love with him. But the protagonist ends up clearing up the confusion, stating that it is not the case at all, as she is neither the most beautiful nor the richest woman in the world, so it doesn't make sense that he will do something like that to her. She soon realizes that he might be having connections with multiple women who are more beautiful and powerful than her, so he tries to make her matter by extending the conversation, which makes her ask for an example from him. But the protagonist knows her trap already, so he states that no matter how hard she tries, he will not fall for that at all as it gets into his zone of privacy. While they are busy bickering with each other, the protagonist gets a sudden phone call from Soo King-ying stating that it is necessary for them to meet in person, so they should be making an appointment soon enough. The protagonist ends up asking her if meeting in person is necessary for him to do so, which Ying answers by saying that it is. And they are about to meet at Tang Shaw's private clubhouse the next morning as she has a lot of things to discuss with him. Ying sets up the timing for the next morning at 9 o'clock and states that he should be calling her after arriving in the area. The whole conversation between Ying and the protagonist makes Mrs. Lai uncomfortable as she starts questioning him about her asking if she is his woman already or not. The protagonist states that she isn't his woman for now, but there might be some chances to fulfill those criteria in a few days, which he doesn't even know about. Even though Lai didn't know much about Ying, she has heard of her affairs since it isn't a secret to the public, and it seems that the father of Ying is so strict that he keeps the family principles strict than ever as he is already frail and old. The only way he made her lead life is by keeping up with the nobility, making sure she doesn't fall in love even when she goes on studying abroad by keeping bodyguards available around her 24/7. The only set of rules to get into a relationship with Ying seems to be that a blind date will get arranged on behalf of her, which makes the situation more extreme. Also, the guy cannot be too old or too young, and at the same time, his assets must not be less than 1 billion. The condition doesn't even end there, since the most important thing is that the guy will have to marry into the Soo family. After thinking of all the conditions revolving around her, Mrs. Lai thinks that there is no way that he will end up accepting something like that to be with Ying. She states that it is impossible for him to catch up to her, and he instantly makes a proposal to make another bet then and there. As demanding as Mrs. Lai is, she ends up calling for the bet once again, which makes the protagonist feel like he was getting judged by her as she already lost to him once in a bet but isn't backing down at all at the same time. Mrs. Lai ends up stating that she will give him 30 days to keep his promise, and if he loses, he will have to do the same thing that she did in front of him after losing the bet. But the protagonist insists that he will only need 3 days for reaching his way into Soo King-ying to make her the woman that will stay with him for the rest of his life, and ends up asking her about what she will do after losing the bet as he ends up grabbing her from the side. Things were about to get intense between them as they continue to converse with each other, but Mrs. Lai breaks up the condition, saying that if she ends up losing again, she will finally admit her defeat, which settles the final round. The next day, the protagonist ends up arriving at the Tang Sha private club, which is in the northern suburbs of Donghai City. The moment he arrives at the club, the receptionist confirms that he is there to meet with Miss Soo, which makes them confirm his name. The waiter claims that Miss Ying has already been waiting for him, and he keeps on taking her to the area she is currently in right now. After some time, the protagonist ends up arriving at the Gold Court where Ying is playing golf on her own. She ends up asking him about the matter, which he revealed to her that day via sending a text to her. But he insists that the way he knew isn't important at all, which ends up provoking her to name a price as she thought that he might be blackmailing her from the beginning. When the protagonist asks her about it, she states that if he refuses to take the money, it will make him more suspicious in front of her, which makes him ask her why she didn't bring more bodyguards so they could just arrest him and execute him right then and there, so he will end up shutting his mouth forever. Ying states that she is nothing like Lai Ruobing, so she will not do something like that ever. Also, the fact that he is the boyfriend of Mrs. Lai is known by everyone, so nobody would dare to act like that to him ever. The whole thing makes him realize that she must need something that will make her feel reassured, and he suddenly embraces her forcefully, all of a sudden stating that he will teach her how to play golf, so she shouldn't be talking too much about it. The whole scenario makes her think that Mrs. Lai would never leave him to live in peace if she knew that he is acting like this with her. At the same time, she would never believe that he was just here to teach him how to play. But he isn't scared of his life at all, since he is the one who should be scared to death and not her. The bodyguards of Ying couldn't understand what they should do, since they are now unable to confirm if she is resisting his actions or supporting them. Ying tends to threaten him by calling him out to his girlfriend Mrs. Lai, and to which he replies that he is scared for sure, but she should also be scared of him as he already holds all of her secrets, which makes them even somehow. She couldn't believe how he would give him such a handle for her to blackmail him, but instead of getting scared, the protagonist ends up spanking her, saying that she needs to correct her posture when it comes to playing golf. The actions made by the unknown man get the bodyguards to shiver on their own as they end up calling her mother, stating that her daughter might be in danger, so they will be needing her confirmation. The protagonist keeps on lecturing her about the proper posture once again as she finally gets her to move correctly before making a hit on the golf ball on the ground. The protagonist brags about his training but states that it will not be possible for him to teach her anymore because her mother has already brought someone over to arrest him already. It seems that all of his suspicions are correct as the bodyguards are updating her mother non-stop about the things that the protagonist is now doing with her, which gets her so concerned that she keeps on reaching the club by using her car to rush inside. The mother of Ying was doing her best to reach the club as soon as possible while the bodyguards continue to update her throughout the time, so the protagonist cannot escape from the place even if he tries his best to do so. Even Ying herself is confused about what to do as her mother is reaching the place, which makes the protagonist propose the plan of escaping together as soon as possible, which makes her think as she dives down into deep thought. He insists and keeps on asking her if she wants to keep on living like a prisoner her whole life, and instantly ends up grabbing her hands, saying that they should just think of nothing and run as fast as they can. The moment they begin running, the bodyguards start chasing them down behind them up to the moment they end up driving away in the car the protagonist brought in that point. The bodyguards stop right then and there to inform their boss so she could learn that her daughter is now with the guy as they are driving away in the street. Even the woman couldn't believe that something like this could ever happen in her whole life. Meanwhile, the protagonist was asking if Ying is afraid whatever that is going on in their life, to which she states that she isn't, and the same moment she gets a call from her mother which gets her heavily worried about the situation. That instant the protagonist suggests that she should consider being herself for a day to see what happens from then on. Ying's mother keeps on asking her about who she is with right now as she is trying her best to reach her, to which she replies that she is with a friend, which ends up getting her mother so badly which she didn't even expect. She keeps on asking from who she is with, to the topic that she is now letting her down by acting like that it doesn't even stop from then and there. Her mother keeps on threatening her to reach back home as soon as possible, but according to the protagonist, she is about to act on her own accord today, which is for sure. She ends up yelling back at her mother as she is already in a lot of pain living on their own made-up rules, to the point she cannot hold on to her thoughts anymore. Instead of living like a puppet of her mother, she intends to live like a human who has her own set of choices as she throws away her phone on the street from the car. That same moment, the protagonist says that her mother will try her best to look for her as the ability of Sue family is quite impressive to begin with. He also continues to ask her if she isn't afraid to come with him, as he could be someone who is trying to abduct and sell her off to someone which can end up risking her life. Ying states that her mother will never order so much manpower to look for her own daughter, as she tends to care more about the family reputations. And the fact that she came with him doesn't even matter, because in her whole life nobody was able to approach her because of her lifestyle and family situations. Also, she is in a bad state from the beginning of her life, as people always praised her because of what she has in life rather than looking right inside her. None of the people she met in life was ever interested in her and her only, and at the same time her mother wanted to use her like a puppet who will listen to her every words, and she wasn't even allowed to even eat anything else which isn't suggested by her mother, as she doesn't want her to get fat and lose the title of the most beautiful woman. She claims that she is tired of all of it, so running away with him must have been the best choice she made in her whole life, as she can feel comfortable with him as a person. Then she reaches for the seatbelt and ends up asking him about his relationship with Lai Ryobing once again, as he is her boyfriend. She ends up kissing and biting him forcefully while she is focused right on the street as he has to drive, which gets him quite off guard all of a sudden. He ends up getting frustrated to see the desperation in her, thinking that she might have the death wish, otherwise she wouldn't be doing something like this while he is busy driving the car. He ends up ordering her to sit still before she was about to continue the conversation further, and she gets that she has no way other than listening to him. The protagonist gets busy thinking about her hidden attributes, which is really interesting, as once in a distinct reincarnation he met her on the day of Millennium when he captured her for the first time. He still remembers the day clearly, as she is still the most beautiful girl in the world without any kind of flaws. And to satisfy his strong curiosity, she ended up opening forum filled with comments in front of him, which was filled with questions about her dark, deep desires. Even though she might be having a shiny, crystal clear, perfected picture in front of everyone, the actual fact behind everything is something else, as her real self keeps on weighing her down like shackles. The whole post not only showed the chains and masks on Ying's body, but also the textual evidence of her hidden attributes as a jitterbug, and he couldn't help but wonder that he would have to use that attribute of hers one day. Soon he advises her to sit tight and fasten her seatbelt, asking her where she wants to go to, as they can go wherever they want, to which she replies that she wants them to go back to his house, to which he instantly agrees. Then fast forward 4 hours later, both of them are found naked and lying on each other, while the protagonist suddenly gets called by Brother Lai, who sounds concerned about him, as Mrs. Su even went so far as to visit him to look for the protagonist. After hearing him out, the protagonist claims that it is a small problem that he will handle alone, so he shouldn't be meddling in it, as it can create a problem for him which can anytime go out of proportion. After hanging up the call, the protagonist ends up getting a call from Lai Ryobing, who wants to know about the situation between him and the Su family, as she could already notice the fuming situation between both sides, which was making her curious. To make the situation clearer to her, the protagonist ends up holding the phone close to Ying, who then talks accordingly as soon as he says that she can say whatever she wants, as she has nothing to worry about. Not realizing what is happening, Ying ends up holding the phone to answer whoever that was calling and decides to ask out the person on the other side of the phone. After talking blindly for a while, they both realize whom they are talking to and Lai starts questioning Ying about her relationship with the protagonist. After coming to her realization, she insists that they are just friends who are talking about work with each other. But Lai Ryubing could clearly understand that she was talking about something else before, but somehow, she is claiming that they are both friends right now, which seems suspicious. She then insists that Ying should give the phone back to the protagonist, which she does, and Lai questions him about his whereabouts. The protagonist claims that he is still in the old house in the villa that her brother gave him, and after hearing that, Lai says that they should wait for her in there as she is coming as soon as possible. The protagonist thinks of himself that the whole thing will get more and more interesting as soon as Lai Ryubing will arrive, which makes Ying afraid as she has a hard time realizing if he truly worries about her knowing the whole thing or not. Then the protagonist decides to come clean in front of Ying, and he ends up stating their secret that they are not really in a relationship that everyone thinks about themselves. After hearing that, Ying relieves quite a bit as she already knows about the 3 fake boyfriends of Lai Ryubing already. But the protagonist is kind of skeptical about the whole situation, which makes him say to her that she shouldn't be disclosing this information to anyone, as even Lai's younger brother doesn't know about it. Also, it will cause a great amount of trouble for him if he ends up knowing about it. This situation makes her also realize that the reason why he sent her a fake handle and lied to her is that he isn't afraid of Lai Ryubing at all, since it was his plan that he made from the beginning. She tries to get mad at him, but it turns into another naughty incident between them both, as she couldn't stay mad after he ends up grabbing and embracing her close to him once again. It seems that she doesn't have any grudges against him, as she believes that he has done only good for her by doing that. And on the other side of the town, Lai Ryubing was driving straight to their destination while not realizing why someone like Ying would get into a suspicious relationship with the protagonist, as it doesn't even make any sense. Mrs. Lai realizes that just like the previous time when Tao Ying's contract signing, the only issue in the middle is the protagonist himself. It only makes her feel like he must be some kind of god who has unfathomable and mysterious skills and abilities. Then fast forward 40 minutes later, Lai Ryubing finally reaches the protagonist's house, and he ends up welcoming her with his kind greeting. As soon as she steps inside the house, she gets desperate and looks for Ying, questions him where she is, and she notices Ying wearing a maid dress. The whole scenario seems rather uncanny for Lai Ryubing, who is having a hard time believing whom she is seeing in front of her. The whole picture of Ying gets more unbelievable each moment as she sees her cooking for the protagonist and her at the same time. Just upon Lai's sudden arrival, she gets ready to cook for her as well, and to which Lai ends up questioning the protagonist as she couldn't wrap her head around all of it. He takes the whole event normally as he states that it is just his woman cooking for him. When she doubts about Ying being his woman, he states that she just became his today, even though they did not know anything about each other. Suddenly, Ying calls for the protagonist, stating that the meal will be ready soon and she needs to get to the bathroom, so he will have to watch the pot for a while. Before leaving, Ying states that Lai Ryubing should be sitting at the table as the food will be ready as soon as possible, which gets Lai more nervous than ever as feminism gets thrown out of the window. They all soon sit down to eat as the food is ready, and Ying even goes far as to feed the protagonist, which gets too hard for Lai to stand. The feeling of being left out was causing her a whole lot of pain, which made her think that she cannot be led to astray again. So she decides to have the initiative to make attack on her competitor. Mrs. Lai ends up asking her about the length of their relationship, which Ying claims that their love happened after they fell for each other at first sight, which bounded their destiny. Lai found it suspicious that someone could fall for someone like the protagonist after checking out his mysterious yet weird family background, as she herself comes from a traditional family. Surprisingly, she ends up pointing out that she knows about him and Lai's fake relationship, which they are maintaining to keep up the facade in front of her fiancé. The founding truth that came out of Ying's mouth ends up getting her flabbergasted, which keeps Mrs. Lai shut up for a while as the protagonist and Ying both keep on their romance, provoking the woman in front of them. The situation gets clear in front of Mrs. Lai, to which she decides to act upon as she grabs one of the pawns to feed the protagonist in front of Ying. When the protagonist notices that he has nothing else to do other than keeping up the act, all of them shut up their mouth while he gulps down his food. Soon, when the protagonist finishes up eating his food, he states it in front of both of them, and Ying immediately claims that she will clean up and he should accompany Mrs. Lai while she finishes up, as they cannot neglect their guest. As soon as Ying leaves the room with leftovers, Mrs. Lai instantly gets up from her seat to confront her fake boyfriend about the situation ahead of them. She moves up her actions by grabbing his hands, but he decides to take it to another level by dropping down on the couch while grabbing her down on himself. Instead of focusing on the matter on hand, He claims that she still has to talk about the bet she made, and the fact that she wanted to pay up once again rises up in the conversation. The whole incident between gets more stickier than ever, as she was having hard time believing that he would begin talking about something like that while ignoring whatever she was trying to clear up. And that's how the first part of this Manhwa ends. Well guys, if you like this video and you want a second part, comment below with the word part 2. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. But most important, leave a comment. Until the next video.